what remained of the poor animal I buried under some loose earth in the garden. I left that place immediately. Despite my unfortunate encounter in the hollow, I still felt empowered that I had actually plucked up the courage to revisit the place, to see how ordinary it really was. I said goodbye to the old neighborhood, to that bad memory, once and for all, and began to make my way home. Welcome to ChronicleVibe, your channel, your place, where you can come and hide from the reality, get immersed in different universe of different stories. Bedtime by Whitehouse. At the bottom of the garden stood a sycamore tree, which looked to be even older than the house. I was amazed at how unchanged it was. I had grown up, gone onto a pastor's new, but the old sycamore still stood wise, warm, almost friendly in its appearance. I think it's a rite of passage for any child to have a place to hide things. It's often their first experience with independence, something removed from any authority figure. For me, my stash was halfway up the old sycamore. I'm sure I must have looked like a fool, but I happily and gleefully climbed the tree with abandon. The configuration of the branches had changed in places, but overall, the happy memories of playing amongst the limbs of the old sycamore, of having a little piece of the world to myself, away from everyone else, seemed vivid, as it was remarkable how much remained unchanged. Halfway up, I caught my breath and smiled to myself. In the central trunk of the tree lay a hollow. Whether it had been created by an animal, or perhaps the tug of a gale on the weakened branch long ago, I do not know. But it was where I kept things. If I found something which I was sure would be taken from me for being inappropriate, into the hollow it would go. The truth is, though, the majority of the items inside were not very interesting. Mostly just toys and rarely exotic pieces of contraband like a slingshot or some smoke bombs. I had no reason to hide the toys, but when I was young, it felt adventurous to have a secret. The hollow was dark and filled halfway with rotting leaves. No doubt, deposited there from countless autumns. Nevertheless, I reached deep inside to see what remained. I couldn't believe it. I had found the toy that I had hidden there before we moved all those years ago. I could feel the plastic in my hand. Its sharp edges unmistakable, but the leaves and the darkness of the hollow obscured its view from me. As I struggled to remove it from the thick, wet mixture of rotting leaves and rainwater, it seemed to be caught amongst a collection of small twigs. The reason I was so excited was that I knew when we moved that I had left one of my favorite toys behind. A small plastic First World War British soldier. It may not sound like much, but I had grown up on my family's stories of my grandfather's adventures during both wars, and while he had passed away before I was born, I would often act out exaggerated versions of the stories with this small soldier in the role of the hero, my intrepid grandfather. At the time, I thought a hollow the perfect hiding place for a soldier. My delight, however, quickly turned to horror. I felt sick to my stomach, for as I pulled the soldier out, I realized it was not my toy, but something else entirely. stuffed into a bag of the hollow amongst the sludge, and now in my hand was the skeletal remains of a small animal. The bones crunched together in my grip as a few small flecks of hair and flesh left on it putrefied between my fingers. I almost lost my balance as a rotten and potent smell of the dead escaped through my moist grasp, invading my senses. I climbed back down carefully, dejected. There was nothing else in the hollow. My toy was gone, probably taken by another child during the subsequent years. What remained of the poor animal I buried under some loose earth in the garden. I left that place immediately. Despite my unfortunate encounter in the hollow, I still felt empowered that I had actually plucked up the courage to revisit the place, to see how ordinary it really was. Made me feel in control once more of my faculties. I did not at the time require anything other than a conventional explanation. I said goodbye to the old neighborhood, to that bad memory, once and for all, and began to make my way home. By the time I had driven onto the motorway, something had begun to filter through from the back of my subconscious. At first, I disregarded it, dismissing it as my imagination. But as the sun shone its last and dipped below the horizon, I sensed the growing of a compulsion in me. An idea which seemed to have been born and nurtured for no good reason, no rational, no sound casual footing, but one which had to be followed at all cost. I must get home. I increased my speed, jibbing sporadically between the slower cars on the motorway, looking in the rearview mirror, keeping an eye on what might be following. I had to get home. Again, I drove faster, constantly looking behind as if racing some unseen pursuer. 70, 80, 100 miles per hour. I tore along the road. I beeped, I yelled, the sweat laced off of me. What was happening to me? Please just let me go home. White-knuckled, I finally made it off of the motorway and onto the country roads, which would lead directly to my town. The roads were narrow and wound around the now bleak and ominous countryside. Darkness seemed to blanket the road in front of me. I turned my full beam on and breathed a sigh of relief to see a bright light again, even if artificial. The manic anxiety which had seemed to grip me on the motorway appeared to have diminished. However, I still glared into the rearview mirror more often than I should have, just to make sure that there was nothing following me. What a ridiculous thought, to think of something chasing my car, to put myself and others in danger by speeding down a busy motorway. Madness. Still, madness or not, I had felt compelled to get away as quickly as possible, and even though I had managed to collect my nerves, the loneliness of the road I was on fueled my yearning for my own town, my own street, my own bed. Nervously, I traversed the web-like winding road which sheared through the countryside, feeling relieved at the first sign of a lamppost of civilization and of the boundaries of my town. I pulled up outside of my house, switching the engine off, and sat for a moment in silence. I had to stop all of this nonsense, things coming out of the walls, watchers smoothering me at night, looking into someone's window like a prowler. All of this was lunacy. Tomorrow, I would start afresh. No more writing about my childhood experiences. No more reliving of dread-filled nights. Just getting back to normal, carrying out my work, spending time with my girlfriend, and most of all reaffirming my belief, faith, and confidence in science and rationality. Then the thing in the back seat leaned over, grabbed me by the shoulder and breathed a foul, rancid breath from deep inside its lung down the back of my neck. I scrambled for the door, my arms flailing around looking for the lock. Fear possessed me, shook me, a fear I remembered all too well. A fear from all those years ago, lying awake at night in that sickening room. The inside of the car had grown much colder, but there was nothing compared to the icy fingers burrowing into my shoulder. I honestly thought I was going to die, that this thing would finally get its way after all this time. The door handle popped in my panicked grip, and I fell out of the driver's seat onto the pavement. For the briefest of moments, I thought I caught a glimpse of something in the back seat. Vague, the form of an old man, yet twisted and distorted, grinning from ear to ear. Luckily, there was no one around, as had there been I would have appeared a mad fool, for the car was empty. I grabbed the key from the ignition and booted the door shut with my foot, locking it for the night. I staggered down the path and into my house. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I drank myself to sleep last night. You may recall that I said I had evidence, actual physical evidence of something unnatural. You might be wondering what that evidence is. Well, I could say that it was the marks on my shoulder that made me shudder with fear, or I could tell you that my bedroom window lying pressed open this morning by what looked like a claw marks has left me dreading tonight or any other. But no, none of that scared me as much as what I saw today upon waking. Sometimes the most frightening of messages are the most simple. For lying on my chest as I awoke this morning was a toy soldier. The soldier I had hidden in that hollow all those years ago returned to me as an adult, bitten in half. Bedtime by Whitehouse. That was the part 5. In the next weekend, I'll be uploading part 6. If you guys like my work and you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video. It encourages me a lot. And if you want to stay connected and listen to part 6 when it comes in the next week, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to share. Until we meet again, have a great weekend guys, and keep your imagination alive.